This is The Guide Gals, a modern, wedding-focused podcast by the experts at Here Comes the Guide. I'm Chelsea, a designer and inspired creative who's probably racked up over 7,000 hours on Pinterest and the friend who's going to shoot it to you straight.
And I'm Caroline, a social media manager who is obsessed with dogs as ring bearers and will inevitably cry over your wedding video. We've seen it from all sides. We've been brides, planners, bridesmaids, and have worked with standout brands throughout the industry.
Think of us as an extension of your wedding party and hang out with us as we share the ins, outs, ups, and downs of the road to I Do.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the podcast. Today we're going to talk all about elopements and everything that you need to make yours come to life.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm excited for this. I feel like elopements are just getting more and more popular, which I love. I think that they're so special. I love the intimacy. And yeah, so I'm really excited about that
The other
fact.
part that I love about elopements, yes, they're beautiful and intimate, but they're also a lot easier to execute. There are less moving parts. They have smaller guest lists, so there can be a reduced cost and also less to think about, just making it an overall better experience.
Right, yeah. With all of those factors, less logistics, all of that, you can definitely save a lot of money or like reallocate your funds. Instead of having a huge wedding, you're able to spend less on it. You might like choose to do like a big honeymoon or something like that. So there's a lot of positives in like kind of the breaking of tradition that elopements do. And yeah, we love them.
Yes,
So
yeah.
we're happy to give you tips on how to execute a successful elopement.
Yes, and before we jump into all of those tips in our checklist, obviously we're going to talk about what we're drinking today. Chelsea, what do you got?
I have home coffee in like a to-go cup, just because it keeps it warm.
Yeah. Even though,
Groundbreaking.
yes, we do record remotely, like we're in our own homes. So I love the travel mug in your home.
Yeah, I traveled from the kitchen, which is right there, to this chair. So, what are you having?
I am just drinking water out of my Stanley, ice cold, and I don't know. It's just like plain Jane this morning. I have been on this whole thing like don't drink coffee until 90 minutes after you wake up, which has been well over 90 minutes, but I'm still drinking water. I don't know why. Can
The
someone
picture of health.
Well, I'm trying. Can someone explain to me like the thing is I follow these things and I have no idea. Like I don't know. It to me kind of makes sense. I'm like, oh yeah, like maybe I shouldn't pour caffeine down my body immediately after getting up. It does give me a little bit of a serotonin boost just because I love beverages. I love coffee so much. But something about like now I get the serotonin boost from being like, oh, I'm just drinking water. I'm a health goddess.
If that does it for you, I don't know if it like does it for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the caffeine makes you stressed immediately, and it's bad for your health.
I
Whatever.
know. Can someone comment somewhere and let me know why exactly that is the case? I could look it up on my own. I just haven't. But yeah, here I am drinking my water.
Good for you. Okay, so as we start to break down our checklist here for you, we have things broken into categories. The first one we're going to talk about is logistics. So just like any other wedding celebration, there are some like really basic steps that need to be established. I'm just going to go ahead and roll through these, but you need to talk with your partner about your budget. You need to figure out what your budget is first and foremost. We really, like this is true for every kind of wedding that you have, and we have a couple early episodes all about budgeting. So check those out. I'd recommend checking those out for sure. You need to talk about when you want to get married. You have a specific date in mind, time of year, at least figure out like a general time frame. Of course, like depending on what venue you choose or something, it might depend on availability for exact dates. But if you do have something, your heart set on something, get that squared away right away. Where do you want to elope? Do you want to do it locally? Did you want to go off to the mountains and do it at some cool destination? It feels to me that like really with elopements, the sky can be the limit. Like you can go elope like on the edge of a cliff or like something really cool. like that if that's your vibe. So yeah, establish that. Are you going to be inviting guests? So I think like the traditional term of elopement, we've talked about this before, is it has shifted in recent years, especially with COVID. I hate talking about it, but especially with that whole pandemic thing.
Right.
Smaller weddings were a necessity if you wanted to get married. So yeah, like with that, and even before that, like the term elopement, like the definition of it is kind of different now. And people might refer to like a micro wedding or a small wedding as an elopement, and that's totally fine. We're on board with that. But yeah, you need to figure out, is it just going to be you and your partner, or are you going to have a small guest list that will come with you? So you need to talk about that. And do you need to hire vendors? So like Caroline said at the top of the episode too, elopements are usually on a much smaller scale in like all terms, and that includes planning. So you might be able to cut out some of those like traditional vendors that you might have if you have a big traditional wedding. But you want to talk about, like, do you want a photographer, a videographer there still? Are you having some sort of like reception piece of it? Like, do you need a DJ, a band? So you need to figure out exactly what those plans are, who you need to hire, and does it fit into that budget that you discussed, the very first line of this stuff. So yeah, it's really important to lay all of this stuff out first, because once you get these things squared away and noted, it'll make the rest of the process so much easier. If you start jumping around and getting to like the more granular stuff first, it's going to be really hard to make those decisions. So yes,
Yeah.
logistics.
A good place to start any sort of wedding planning, not just elopements, anything at all, which you'll hear ring true in some of the other things we talk about, but also there are some specifics we break down that apply just to elopements. And location is probably one of the more interesting ones. I feel like elopements will ring true a little bit more to what we talked about in destination weddings. There may be some things that you have to look into or think about that you may not have to think about if you're in your general area. So whether you are going to tie the knot wherever you go to elope, maybe you just go to your local courthouse. That could be super simple. Maybe you're going to Las Vegas and you're going to do a whole trip and ordeal out of that. Whatever you choose, totally fine. But destination is a good thing to think about, the location wherever you're going, because you'll need to make travel arrangements. You'll have to get your airfare. You may have to get a passport. You may have to, I don't know, look into if you're going to get married at that location. What are the things you need to get your marriage license there instead of in your local area? So some of the things that you need to do require some of that research, just looking into, depending on what you decide, if you are going to do local courthouse ceremony and then celebrate elsewhere, that could be easier. But if you want to do the whole ordeal elsewhere, make sure you do this research. So one thing that we want to break down in this episode, because we talked all about like kind of those destination things in the last episode, we want to talk about what are the things you need to know about the courthouse things to get marriage licenses, especially if you're looking elsewhere instead of your own local places. So one thing to do is to just go to the website for that city, for that county, to look at what that looks like and find the county clerk's office for specifics on how the day can go. And we wanted to lay out some things that you might want to be aware of if this is the route you choose to go to a courthouse. So popular city hall locations like the San Francisco City Hall, beautiful, can book up months in advance, so you do need to make an appointment early if you are going to do something there. The reason that one is so popular is because it is just stunning, beautiful, gorgeous. Look up the pictures if you haven't seen them before. It is a great place to consider, but do be aware that you are going to have to plan in advance for this. And some courthouse locations don't even take appointments for marriages, meaning it's first come, first serve, DMV style. If you're not into that, I understand, because that would be too much for me, but that can be the case at some places. And some states require 2 different appointments, one for your marriage license and within 90 days of that, another for your ceremony. So this is why we're saying, like, you really need to look it up depending on where you go to elope. Oftentimes, couples getting married in a city hall aren't allowed to read their own vows during the ceremony. It's very quick, clear cut. It is just traditional vows, whatever they have going on in there, and they keep it easy breezy beautiful. But if you want to have your own vows, just understand you may not be able to do them there. Maybe read your vows to each other separately beforehand or afterwards. Just make sure you plan for that. And one more thing. Some city hall locations put a limit on the number of guests you're allowed to bring, including witnesses. So if you were planning on having your family attend, just know that there can be a cap on that, and you want to plan for, okay, is that actually what you want? Are you going to do something afterwards beforehand where you can still include everybody? Just thinking about those things. If all of this is sounding kind of crazy to you, this is also a good time to consider hiring a professional who does these types of elopements, gets everything included for you, almost like that all-inclusive package, through a planner who's going to help take care of these details to make, even though there might be less logistics, there's still things you have to think about, think through. And so you can totally pass that off to somebody if you'd like. This is a good time to think about that as you go through the rest of these things.
Yeah, it's a really good thing to think about because there are planners that specifically do elopements. And it's really cool. I love the idea of like a courthouse wedding or something like that too. You can consider all of those different things elopements, but yeah, there are planners who specialize in those things exactly. And like all of those little logistics, or like location logistics, I guess, that Caroline just ran through, I would never think about those things. Like, what do you mean I can't read my own vows? Like, it's my wedding. Like you know,
right.
so if you hire someone who specializes in planning elopements, they probably know, especially if they're in your area, exactly like what restrictions are in what places and what you can do where. So it's a really great resource. We're big fans of planners.
Yeah.
They're so helpful. Also, since you're planning an elopement, you might be saving money that you would normally be, like, you'd normally be spending a lot more if you were doing a really traditional bigger wedding. So you might be able to take those extra funds and allocate them towards something like an elopement specific planner. And that can really make things easier on you.
Absolutely.
And it might make the whole planning, would definitely make the whole planning process probably more enjoyable for you too.
Totally.
So. Okay, the next thing that you're going to want to think about is marriage licenses. So it's not as romantic of a way to think about it, but getting married is like a legal thing. So there are those pieces to the puzzle that you have to consider. And when you're doing an elopement or something like that, a lot of times you are going out of your place of residence. Like you might be going to a different country or something. So the legal requirements for marriage can differ depending on what city you're in, what state you're in, and what country you're in. So sometimes they can include everything from like a blood test to like a waiting period. So you want to do your research depending on where you're getting married to make sure that you have all of those ducks in a row when it comes to that, especially if you're like jetting off to a different country and you're going to elope there. So cool, by the way, send me the pictures. But you need to make sure that like you'll actually be able to get married and you get that blood test that you need to get according to wherever. So make sure that you double check these things. Do you need an appointment in order to pick up your marriage license? Is there a waiting period? If there is a waiting period, what is that waiting period? How long? Some states require up to a week between when you file for the marriage license, like Caroline said, like sometimes there is that waiting period. Make sure you know what it is. Do you need witnesses? I know Caroline just talked about that a little bit too, but most states require 2 witnesses be physically present to sign the marriage license, but some states or countries have different requirements. Some states allow you to do it yourself, which means you don't have to have witnesses, but double check on that. Call and ask if you're confused. Sometimes too, like Caroline said, go to the courthouse website. Like some of those websites really
They're so bad.
like are not like like it's not an easy time. So yeah, double check, call, talk to a person, ask specific questions. Also, what are the officiant requirements? So unless you are getting married in a courthouse where that is provided, if you're getting married, like I said, on the edge of a cliff or something, you probably need to provide your own officiant. Figure that out. Are there other legal issues that you might run into? So maybe it might be a good idea to keep birth certificates, divorce papers from previous marriages, other important documents on hand. You never know, okay? Like make sure that you have these things figured out so that you don't end up like really disappointed when something like isn't able to pan out. So try to be as prepared as you possibly can be.
Yes.
And call. I hate calling people. I hate making phone calls and calling. I hate it. But do it.
Do it.
Do it.
Yes.
Ask the questions.
Yes.
Figure it out.
Because they're going to be like, that's their job. They can help you with that. They'll help you figure it out. And you don't want to have any added stress around your wedding day.
Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about logistics, location, now the marriage license. Kind of a short and sweet section is just travel and accommodations. We mentioned it before. We'll say it again. Just if you are traveling outside of your place of residence, you're going to need to know, is this in driving distance? Do I need a rental car? Do I need a plane ticket? Do I need accommodations at this place and that place? And do my guests need accommodations? So starting to think about that, getting all of that booked. Does anybody else need additional things? Oh, I've seen this before. If you get married in like a national park and people ride like horses to the destination, or you might have to pack hiking stuff and then I don't know. There's a lot of different travel accommodation things to think about depending on the place that you're going. So make sure every single piece of it is figured out. You don't want to be stuck somewhere where you can't get a ride share service, or you don't want to get somewhere where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I had a ferry over to this part of this island, whatever. Think through all of those things and get those things squared away.
Yes, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's like really with this entire episode, with this checklist, just try to prepare yourself. That's what we're saying. So make sure that like all of these things on these different sections of our checklist, do it beforehand. And you will thank yourself later. Because I know that like the general vibe of elopements is like being spontaneous and going and running off and doing this, but that sounds so great. But it's not necessarily going to work. Like you said, like there are waiting periods and blood tests and I don't know what else. So yeah, just making sure that you prepare yourself for this spontaneous act of love. You're going to thank yourself later.
Yes.
The next thing that you want to prepare yourself for is rings. So it is, I know you're breaking tradition just with the idea of eloping in general. So you don't necessarily have to exchange rings during your ceremony. It's optional, but it is like a super symbolic thing. And you may want to do that. So of course you're going to want to have your rings prepared beforehand, go shopping for them. And the reason that you might be doing an elopement in the first place is it might be because you want to save money or you want to spend money on other things. So you don't necessarily have to spend like thousands of dollars on bands to exchange. We have some suggestions. You can always do those silicone bands. You can find those all over the place, all over the internet. You can also search for just like cheap wedding bands on Etsy. I love Etsy. Yeah. Just because it's like cheaper on Etsy doesn't mean that it's necessarily like bad or anything. They have some really beautiful stuff on there. They even sometimes have like vintage stuff on there that you can find. So I think that's really cool. We've also seen people do ring pops, like for real. So like if that's your style, if it's like cute and funny. Wait, was it Sophie Turner and Joe Jonas that did the ring pops in Vegas?
Maybe.
Was it?
I don't remember.
R.I.P. to that relationship.
No, seriously.
We can cut
if that doesn't apply.
Sorry. Because I was like, ooh, someone did that. And then I was like, oh.
So Luke and I actually have used these. Luke is my husband, in case you didn't know. We have used some of these options. So when I know I've talked about it before. We got married during 2020 in April. Everyone knows what was going on during that time. We couldn't get Luke a wedding band, like the wedding band that we wanted. We couldn't go in any place. We couldn't go to buy that. So we were supposed to get married in April. We actually ended up getting married in May. So we were waiting to see if we could get something eventually. And of course, never were able to do that. So we just got a wedding band for him on Etsy. And he loves it. He also loves it mostly because he's like, I'm kind of glad we didn't get an expensive one. Because if anything happens to his, he doesn't care. He's like, I can order another one on Etsy. Totally fine. Yeah. It's held up really, really well, though. It's amazing. And I also really love the silicone bands because I've talked about this before, too. I get eczema on my hands. And right now it is on my ring finger, which is so tragic because it's so uncomfortable to have anything on my finger. I've been wearing the silicone band, though. That's been the closest I can get to like wearing something. And it's just great to have, whether it's for an elopement or just to have long term. I recommend that option as well, just for if you're going to go on a honeymoon and go swimming, if you're going to be traveling and you don't want to lose your engagement ring or your wedding band, those are really valuable options, whether you're getting like going to elope or just getting married and just want to have some backups. The next thing we're going to talk about are photographers and other vendors. So we really, yes, there are a lot of things you can pare down on for elopements, but we are very big fans of wedding photography in general. This is not a place to skimp on that. In fact, I think
Yeah.
because you are paring down on some other things, you might have some wiggle room in your budget to put more towards photography. And we absolutely recommend that because it's a huge piece. It's you're doing this big spontaneous fun thing, maybe like you're going to Vegas and doing it on your own, or maybe you are going to a national park and getting married in Acadia, which is I've talked about that before too. It's a dream for me. Love that idea. So book that photographer in advance. And okay, it's not mandatory, but you are probably going to want photographic evidence of this big occasion in your life. Like, this is a huge deal. So take advantage of any of that money that you are saving, put it towards a photographer. And this is also a great time to think about if you are traveling, you're going to have to pay a travel fee anyways for a photographer. You don't necessarily need to book one in that general area. Maybe you do, but it could be a fun time for you to really look at all the different wedding photographers out there. Some people do specialize in elopements, and so definitely look at all of those things. You could also get special rates for photography in this aspect, because if you are just going to do an elopement at, your city hall, it's a shorter time frame. You can get some really great pictures there, but it could be cheaper still to get good photography if it's on a smaller scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, like Caroline for sure agrees with me on this. Photography and videography, those like documents of your day, I think are some of the most special and important investments that you can make for your wedding. So I wouldn't skimp on those for sure. And you can, like Caroline said, you can take a look at all different photographers, especially if you're kind of counting on paying a travel fee anyway. A lot are excited to travel, but also there are a lot of photographers and videographers who offer elopements as a separate service. So they sort of specialize in that. I know that there are some that like are elopement photographers or videographers specifically. Like that's what they do. They have it figured out. So they have experience capturing those different kind of moments that are unique to that kind of celebration. So I think that's something for sure worth considering there. Of course, I think a lot of photographers, wedding and videographers in that industry, they have experience with lots of different types of events. So if you're in love with someone's work, but make sure you talk to them about that and make sure that you're gonna get the moments captured that you want.
Yes.
So, yeah.
And yeah, you can just give someone your iPhone and take a bunch of pictures. Like, if you're listening to this podcast episode, I doubt you are that type of person. To me, if you're listening to this episode, you probably are going to lean more towards that photographer. Just saying. And if you don't, if you just are going to give someone an iPhone, totally fine. Just listen to our things I wish I would have known before wedding planning episode and hear how many people say, I wish I would have had a better photographer. So don't take our word for it. There are other people who have said it too. Other than just photography, videography, other things to think about are, do you want flowers? Do you want somebody to make a boutonniere, corsage, different things? There are a lot of websites out there actually that do really great pre-made stuff that they can just send to you, or dried flowers are great options. Etsy, honestly, I found some great options there in terms of dried florals. You could try making your own. There are a lot of different options for that, but just think through what you want in terms of flowers or food or cake or a wedding planner. I know we've talked about that too, also falls under vendor category. Do you want a DJ? Lots of different things to think about here. Just adapting that to whatever your needs are.
Okay, the next thing that we're going to chat about is hair and makeup and also your attire, your outfits. So elopements, usually, we've mentioned this, but like you think elopement, you think like spontaneous, like, oh, I woke up like this and I decided to get married today. But as we're chatting about, and if you're listening to this podcast, once again, you care about planning and being prepared. So on your wedding day, you want to put your best foot forward and you want to feel your best. You want to feel confident and special and beautiful. So you should absolutely think about these things beforehand. So you want to coordinate your outfits for sure. It doesn't mean that you have to go like you can do something that's more casual or that feels more natural to you. You don't have to have like a huge ball gown. You can if you want, for sure. But it can be, something that breaks tradition, but you want to make sure that if you get a dress and you're wearing it, you want to make sure it fits properly. Do you need to get it tailored? All of that. You want to factor in any other outfit choices too. I know Caroline mentioned the idea of like getting married in a national park and maybe you have to hike out to the destination. Like, do you want to get like a cool jacket that you wear as you're hiking out there? Because that part of the celebration will probably be documented in those photos or videos that you have. And like, maybe you don't want to wear like a ratty old stained thing. Maybe you do. Maybe that's your vibe. But like maybe it's not. So those are things to think about, be prepared for. And the hair and makeup situation too. So you can absolutely hire hair and makeup artists, and a lot of them will travel, and you can, discuss that with them. But if you're doing it yourself, you should absolutely do a trial run. So you should test out, like practice doing your hair, see if it works out, or make sure that you go to Sephora or something and say, hey, I want to get all fresh products, and you could do a trial there and they could help you figure out what to buy. Or like the biggest piece of advice is, just be prepared with that, and don't try something brand new like the day of your wedding. Or don't go and say like, you know what, I think I'm gonna have black hair for my ceremony, and go and the night before like head over to Walgreens and get a box dye and dye your hair. Like, don't do that.
Again, I think the people who are listening to this probably won't do that, but that's just us, like, reminding you. We've gotten
take our reminder.
Please. We've gotten crazy ideas at weird hours of the night too before to be like, oh, I'm gonna do this.
100%.
I think Chelsea.
That's the only time that I'm DIYing things like on my face. Like that's when it happens.
Yeah.
Is like,
haven't you taken out your own extensions before too? And aren't you not supposed to do that?
Yeah, well, that's easy. But no, I've done like all the things. Yeah, no, you just pliers, pop. They're out.
Oh, okay.
The beads, the beaded weft things or whatever they're called.
Sure.
Not that hard, but not something to experiment with like, necessarily. Like the morning of, I wasn't going anywhere that day. I don't think.
I love it though.
It wasn't my wedding day.
And I don't know if you're watching this episode, which we do have these episodes available on YouTube. If you're listening to it, you can always see our faces. I don't think I've ever worn my bangs straight across in episodes before. I'm just realizing that now. I've had these for a while though.
New look revealed.
Okay, once your elopement is said and done, once you have gotten everything else that we've talked about in this episode figured out, now is the time to think about those post-elopement celebrations. Maybe you were keeping it a secret and then you want to do a big announcement. Sometimes people do, like, they send out letters afterwards, especially because not everyone who would likely want to be there to celebrate you may have gotten the invite, and they still mean well, and you want to send them a card that says, hey, this is our new relationship status. Maybe you do some sort of small reception over this, like maybe let's say you eloped in January over the new year, something super fun and cute, and then you send out a letter that says, hey, here are some pictures from it, we eloped, celebrate with us in July. That could be a good way to do it. You should also definitely still take a honeymoon, in my professional opinion. Even if you elope, even if it's a cute little thing, take a long weekend. Take a couple special days to go do something, even if you can't do like a full week-long, 2-week-long, whatever trip elsewhere. Do something special for just you guys. I think that can be an intimate dinner just together, or maybe at that point you invite your closest family and friends and say, hi guys, thanks for coming to dinner. By the way, we got married. There are lots of
by the way.
Yes. There are lots of different cute ways to do this celebration, and I think you should make the most of it. Do everything that you can to celebrate your new relationship status.
Yeah, on the subject of like updating people or announcing, especially if you do like the classic elopement kind of thing where it's like a secret, maybe not a secret, but kind of private. Like you're not sending save the dates or anything like that. I think that's really cool, and you can have a lot of fun with how you announce it to people. I love that, like, new relationship status. Yeah, I think that can be really fun. Or like, especially if you do something like that and say like, hey, come party with us. Like, we're going to celebrate this new chapter in our lives or whatever.
Yeah. And really all of this stuff is to help you prepare for that new chapter. Everything in here is just, if you choose the elopement route, we want to make sure that you feel prepared and that it's easy breezy, beautiful, that it's going to be super relaxed. And we will have a downloadable version of that checklist that can be found on our website, linked in our show notes. So we've talked about this before. Yes, you're probably listening to this because you like audio, or maybe you're watching this and you like the visual aspect, but there's something about having that tangible piece of paper in front of you with a checklist, with some things to think about or remember, add to a wedding binder or whatever. So if you are needing those resources, go over to our website to find all of that.
Yes, and our website is theguidegalspodcast.com. And along with that checklist that Caroline just mentioned, we have a full freebie library. So we have a really easy button that you can push and you can download our complete collection. And that is updated every single time we put a new freebie or worksheet out there. It's always free, by the way. So all of that is free to you, easy to download on our website. But this was a super fun episode, and you can find more episodes from us also on our website. Our full episode library is there, so you can watch and listen to all of our episodes there. You can also find us on Instagram at the Guide Gals Podcast, where we post some behind the scenes stuff, some funny things we think were funny at least. And you can find us on TikTok at the Guide Gals Pod. Like I said, our website, theguidegalspodcast.com. Feel free to reach out to us on our contact page there if you have questions for us, episode suggestions, ideas, or you just like want to chat, or if you want to like share a cool story, romantic story, a funny story. We love to hear from you guys in any aspect. But yes, that's all we have for you today.
Yes, we love chatting with you guys every week, and until the next one, cheers.
Cheers.